Alrighty, today we're getting into the call of wisdom, and I've definitely been looking forward to this. This is a very interesting passage, so I'm excited to jump into it with y'all. If you're just now joining us, this is our journey through Proverbs, where we are going verse by verse through the book of Proverbs and just having a conversation with it, asking it questions, finding answers, seeking to encounter God, and not necessarily bringing any preparation or intensive study in advance, but just coming to the Word of God and expecting it to speak back to us and discerning and wrestling with it. So thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to continuing to wrestle with God's Word with you today and to take another step on our journey through the Proverbs. So let's get into it. We'll start by reading the whole section. You can see that I've already divided it into two parts just because I think we'll have to have at least two videos on this section, and normally I would wait to divide it until I'd started one, but as I was looking at it, I was just thinking, well, these are the two sections, and I'll tell you why I divided them this way in a second. And, if we get to more than what I've already picked out in this video, awesome. And if we don't, well, I just kind of didn't want to mess with the moving and the pasting and the typing. So that's why it looks like this. But let's read together. Wisdom cries aloud in the street. In the markets she raises her voice. At the head of the noisy streets she cries out. At the entrance of the city gates she speaks. How long, O simple ones, will you love being simple? How long will scoffers delight in their scoffing, and fools hate knowledge? If you turn at my reproof, behold, I will pour out my spirit to you. I will make my words known to you. Because I have called and you refuse to listen, I have stretched out my hand and no one is heeded. Because you have ignored all my counsel and would have none of my reproof, I will also laugh at your calamity. I will mock when terror strikes you like a storm, and your calamity comes like a whirlwind, when distress and anguish come upon you. Then they will call upon me, but I will not answer. They will seek me diligently, but will not find me, because they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord. Would have none of my counsel, and despised all my reproof. Therefore they shall eat the fruit of their way, and have their fill of their own devices. For the simple are killed by their turning away, and the complacency of fools destroys them. But whoever listens to me will dwell secure, and will be at ease without dread of disaster. Powerful words from Lady Wisdom. But if you're anything like me, this begins to raise a lot of interesting questions. Like wisdom crying aloud in the street. I mean, first off, that is a very fascinating sentence, right? It almost puts us in an entirely new genre, it feels like. I know we're still talking about wisdom literature, but it's like we're getting a totally different version from what we've gotten in the rest of the chapter, right? We had that introduction section where he's kind of outlining the progress and the journey of the wise, and then he's outlining the path and the sales pitch of the sinner, and now we're talking about wisdom. Lady Wisdom is probably what I'll call her, because she does have, right, these she, her, she, these feminine pronouns. But even before we get to those pronouns, wisdom cries aloud in the street. That sentence is wild, right? Like, I'm just gonna, what? There's a lot to parse in this sentence. First off, wisdom is the subject. Right? Wisdom is doing the crying out. And that's a little strange, isn't it? I mean, normally we don't think of wisdom as doing the crying. We think of people as doing the crying, like the crying out and the calling. And so wisdom is the subject, and it's been personified. Okay, that's interesting. Why? Why was that necessary, right? So what's going on? Well, wisdom's been personified. Well, why did that happen? And then not only is she personified, right, but wisdom is personified as a woman. Well, that's a little interesting. Why? Why is she personified as a woman? And then we're not done with these questions, right? She's crying aloud in the street. So she's the subject. But then what's she doing? She's crying aloud. And where is she crying? So what is she doing? Right? These are our implicit questions. What is she doing? Crying aloud. Where? In the streets. And in the markets. Okay. And we have another big question, right? Why is she doing any of these things? Right? Just, what is going on? That's why I think this passage is so exciting. I was just, I've read it before, and I've been looking forward to reading it again with you because this is such a weird thing. And we tend to just read stuff like this in the Bible, and we're just like, oh, yeah, of course, Lady Wisdom crying in the streets. I get it. I know what he means. It's like, do I? I mean, what is happening? What is this? But I think this is right. This is the sort of puzzle that I find really engaging and fascinating. So I've been looking forward to it, to coming to this part of the journey with you. Okay, so off my tangent. Let's start to dig into some of these questions. Man, it's almost hard to know where to start. And it's possible we won't even be able to answer all of these questions until we get deeper into the passage, right? Because it's the whole thing that is going to sort of give us a lot of the depth of these why questions, but maybe we can begin to tease that out. All right. So in the market, she raises her voice. Well, let's get back to the wisdom is the subject, personified as a woman. Why? Okay, I don't know if we can answer this question yet. I mean, there's just nothing that immediately stands out to me as to why is she being personified and why is she a woman in these first few verses, right? Like I said, maybe we'll get more of it in these next few. As we're looking through these, she's doing some very interesting and confusing things. But we may find that these are actually questions that we may not get satisfaction for right now, because wisdom does actually appear later. If I'm remembering correctly, she does appear later in the Proverbs as a lady again, right? So this is not the only time that she'll be personified, and so it just may be the case that we'll have to wait and or go looking for at some point those other passages to bring light to these questions to help us understand. Because these, why is wisdom personified? These are kind of big questions that this immediate context may not be able to give us all of the answers that we want. But okay, having said that, right, given that disclaimer, let's just brainstorm a little bit and see if we can't think of a couple reasons. Okay, so why? Let's start with this one. Why is she being personified, right? Why is wisdom being given a voice? Well, okay, it could just be an effective means of communicating with us. Right? We personify things all the time. We personify our pets. We personify our cars and our just any number of things in the world, right? We personify. We have a tendency to do that. That's why a lot of children's stories are, right, told with animals, because we just have a natural inclination to personify things. And so if wisdom, right? This thing that is ethereal and kind of other than us. And, it's something that we have to be changed by and learn to understand and wrestle with. If we personify it, maybe that gives us more to grasp onto, right? It makes wisdom more approachable. It makes wisdom more understandable. And that would be a very positive thing. Um, it gives us a better grasp and more approachable. Okay. And there might be other reasons why she would need to be personified. Um, well, let's leave it with that for now. And like I said, I have a feeling we're just going to be able to find more of this later, right? Because this this transition is so sudden and in intense, right? Like or drastic. That's what I wanted to say. Drastic shift that, we may just not have the context we need right now to answer some of these questions. And that's okay. Okay, but why a woman? Why a woman? um, well, there might be other reasons later, but if you're thinking about an ancient society in particular, right, a woman is probably less inclined to be listened to, right? So wisdom is speaking, but she's speaking as a woman, and a woman at this time probably would not have been taken very seriously because wisdom deals with very serious, deep, life transforming matters. And so, as a woman, she's less likely to be taken seriously. And why would Solomon want that for wisdom? Well, because maybe wisdom isn't very likely to be taken seriously, right? The wisdom of man is like foolishness to God, right? The things we think are wise are often not wise, and the things that are wise we tend to think are foolish. And so if ancient people and maybe even modern people have a tendency to think that a woman talking like this might be more likely to be foolish, well, then a woman is the suitable gender to personify wisdom. Now, there might be other reasons for this that we could sort of imagine together. But when it is kind of interesting to look at that word reproof, right? In verse 23, if you turn at my reproof, and it's like, well, would men have been wanting to be reproved by a woman in this time? I mean, I would say most men probably struggle with it now, and things have changed quite a bit since ancient times. And so it's very unlikely that a man would want to be reproved by a woman in that time. And so then, right, you're even less likely to listen to her because now she's being rude, right? Now she's dishonoring you. Now she's stepping out of place. And it's like, okay, that's perfect for wisdom. Because wisdom is not a respecter of persons, right? Being wise has nothing to do with your gender or with your social status, but with your character and with God's working and transformation of your life. And so if you are wise, none of this stuff matters. And so it's okay if a woman is wise and then would have the right to do this, but it would be hard to receive, and wisdom is hard to receive. And that's maybe even a better way to put it. It's harder to receive this way. Like, especially for, right, the ancient people. And so then, as a principle for us, wisdom is difficult to receive. But what's very interesting is it may be hard to receive, but it's not hard to find. Isn't that strange? And why isn't it hard to find? Because she's in the streets. crying aloud. She's in the markets, right? She's where people are. And she's making a commotion. She's making herself known. She's drawing attention to herself. Another thing a woman probably would have been disinclined to do in the ancient world. And so this is a very unusual woman, which is maybe another reason that Solomon personifies her as a woman. Right? This would have been a drastic thing. This would have been these would have been drastic kinds of things for a woman to do. And so that makes it an even more sort of challenging image that a woman is the one doing these things. But back to what we were saying, hard to receive but not hard to find, because she is in the streets crying aloud. And so we asked ourselves, right, why is she there? Well, because that's where, right, we kind of answered our own question. Well, that's where the people are. And she's drawing attention. But attention for what? Why does she want this attention? Why is she making herself known like this? Right? Maybe even getting maybe kind of a bad reputation about being a troublemaker kind of thing, right? You could imagine that a woman who actually did this, who went out into the streets and started reproving men and started, making a big commotion and drawing attention to herself in the middle of the market and crying out in the streets. This woman would have been a little strange, right? And she would have had a reputation, and it would be hard for people to reconcile someone like that with wisdom. And so, right, in verse 21, at the head of the noisy street, she cries out. At the entrance of the city gate, she speaks. Right, so she's speaking everywhere. She's going from the gate to the streets to the market. So this woman is everywhere. She's in the whole stinking city, right? So it's not just in the streets and markets. She's everywhere. So anywhere where people are, she is. But why is she making herself known like this, right? What's her motivation? And she says, "How long, O simple ones, will you love being simple? How long will scoffers delight in their scoffing and fools hate knowledge? If you turn at my reproof, behold, I will pour out my spirit to you. I will make my words known to you." Okay. So her motivation might be in these questions. How long, O simple ones, will you love being simple? Okay, so who's she focused on? Okay, she's concerned for the simple, which is completely consistent with the beginning of Proverbs, right? To give prudence to the simple, right? And we spent quite a bit of time talking about how the simple and the youth are the ones who need this wisdom, and then wise people are inclined to give it to them. And so if she's out there crying to everybody, she's where everyone is. There are simple people out there, right? And she's trying to find them. And she's saying, you don't have to be simple. And how long will scoffers delight in their scoffing and fools hate knowledge, right? And hating knowledge is a real problem when knowledge is sort of the beginning step to this whole process of becoming wise. If you don't know what you need to know, then you can't continue, right? Like that step is very much a zero-sum game. You either have it or you don't. And so she's saying, why are you scoffing? Why are you hating knowledge when this is the first step to wisdom? So why is she making herself known? Okay, she's concerned. I think we can pretty confidently say that. She's concerned. She actually cares about these people. She wants, it seems like, to pour out her spirit on them and to make her words known to them. So she's concerned for them. She cares about them. And you might think, well, why is that? They don't seem like people worth caring about. Um, and yeah, maybe you or I would think that, but not a truly wise person. And this isn't just a wise person, this is wisdom, right? So she's the perfect embodiment of this. And just like I said, that connection of going back and recognizing that a wise person is inclined to become a giving person. They are a person who overflows, right? Who overflows into the cups of others, who takes what they have received and been transformed by, and then treats others well relationally. You go from being self-centered to being others-centered, particularly those who don't have what you have, as particularly and especially because this, right, is kind of a mirror of the gospel. So if you didn't watch the first couple videos in the Proverbs series at this point, I highly recommend that you go back and consider them, because this really laid the framework for how this is going to make sense. Because why is she doing all this? Well, she loves them. Why does she love them? Because she's wise. And wisdom makes us more loving. It makes us more relational. It helps us deal with people properly. And that's something else to remember about this, that she is, right? Even though this seems a little weird, this is a little odd, she's being strange, she is dealing with people properly. And this is going to be a principle that we'll have to carry with us, right, when we start to understand, well, how can she laugh, right? How can she laugh at their calamity? How can she mock? How can she say, well, you've despised me and now I'm going to turn away, and there's some other verses. Anyway, this is the main one, right? The mocking and the laughing. It's like, how can that be the proper way to deal with them? And we'll have to figure that out. But she is dealing with people properly because she is wisdom. Okay? But that applies here too. Her crying out in the streets is actually the proper thing for her to do. Okay? That's kind of interesting. Why is it the proper thing for her to do? Well, because she has a care for these people and even an obligation towards these people to give them what she has, but she can't force them to take it, right? And that's why it seems like maybe that's why she's phrasing this as a question. How long, O simple ones, will you love being simple? Right? She's saying here, and let's just finish this up real quick, right? Why does she care about them? Well, it's because she's wise, right? And that's what wise people do, right? Other-centered, overflowing. Okay. But as she's asking these questions, how long, O simple ones, will you love being simple? She's saying, I have something you need. So when are you going to take it? Right? She's not saying, I'm going to force this down your throat. She's saying, hey, I've told you I'm here. When are you going to take what I have to offer? When are you going to get off the path you're on? Right? Because all these people are on a path. Right? The simple are on a path. The fool is on a path. The scoffer is on a path. And the end of all these paths is just death. Right? I mean, if you don't have wisdom, it's become pretty clear as we've gone through that you're just going to get sucked into paths that take you to your own destruction. That's just what's going to happen. And she's saying, hey, you can step off this path anytime. Anytime you want. Because I've made myself known to you, right? I've made ways for you to actually step off, because if you did, right? If you turned at my reproof, I would pour out my spirit and I would make my words known to you. And wow, let's go back to those first sets of notes again, right? I will make my words known to you, right? What step of the process were we looking at there? Oh yeah, to know wisdom and instruction, to understand words of insight, right? To understand the words of the wise and their riddles, right? These words of the wise are the key to moving forward, are the key to receiving and being changed. And so she's saying, hey, I know things you don't know. I know things you don't know, and I'm willing to help you know them. I'm willing to give you my words. I'm willing to give you my spirit, right? And that, again, my spirit, that's that overflowing idea. She has so much to give, and it's just flowing out of her. You know, her cup is full and abundant, and she just wants you to receive it, but she can't force you to receive it. You know, if you have the lid on your cup, like we've talked about before, she's not going to take the lid off. You have to do that. You have to take the lid off. And so she's just overflowing, abundant, beautiful. But simple ones love being simple. And scoffers delight in scoffing, right? And that's a problem. Because all of these people, wow, I didn't notice that until just now. All these people, they have incentive to stay on their path. Right? It's love, delight, and hate. Right? Two positives and a negative. But it's counterfeit. Right? This goes back, and you know, if you haven't been watching the full series, this goes back to the video we just talked about that wrapped up the warning to the sinners. Oh no, the whole warning to the sinners, or sales pitch of the sinners and warning to the wise. These are counterfeit things. Right? Yeah, you'll get companionship, but it'll be broken and self-centered. Yeah, you'll get the valuables you want, but it'll be fleeting and not lasting. Yeah, you'll get entertainment and you'll get to consume, but it'll be blood. You know, it's not worthwhile. It's not substantial. It's just blood. And so this love, this delight, this hate, they're all counterfeits that are tricking you, deceiving you. And that's why she says, how long? How long? How long? Because this is all a waste of time. How long will you remain on this path when you don't have to? How long? And I mean, that's a question we all have to ask ourselves. How long are we willing to do the things that are not wise? Because their only end is destruction. So how long? How long is it going to be? Right? Is it going to be the whole time? Is it going to be most of the time? Well, that's a decision we get to make, because we don't get to pretend like wisdom wasn't an option. Right? We don't get to pretend like wisdom wasn't an option, because she was out there everywhere. She was coming to us. She was in the streets. She was in the marketplace. She was at the gates. We don't get to pretend like we have an excuse. And without just going off full on another tangent, doesn't that sound like someone else? Right? Doesn't that sound like the Savior of the world? The one who came from heaven and made himself known, and he went from the highest to the lowest, and he let them know who he was, and he lets each one of us know who he is, right? There's no excuse. Jesus made himself known. Wisdom makes herself known. And so when our end is death, when we waste our lives, we can't pretend like we didn't have the option not to. Because she was out there. She was calling. But we weren't inclined to listen because we were incentivized by our own corrupt desires, our own counterfeit desires and satisfactions. So we went on a very interesting journey with these verses, right? Why is she personified? Why is she a woman? We gave some options. I think the best one is probably the less likely to be taken seriously, harder to receive. I think that's pretty interesting. I still don't think we've gotten a really strong sense of why she's a woman. But actually, now that I'm thinking back, the effective means of communicating, more approachable, that actually goes really strongly with this idea that she's giving us an option to get off the path. Because what's the best way people learn? Well, people learn best from other people, right? And so by personifying her, it's doubling down on that idea of there is no excuse. Because this was a person. This wasn't just some ethereal essence. This was a person with words, right? And there's a lot of ways we could take that. But it does continue to foundationalize the fact that this was an option. Because, right, they were crying out in the streets. She was everywhere. She was where the people were, right? And she was noticeable. She was a very unusual woman. She was drawing attention to herself. And why was she doing all this? Because she cares. And why does she care? Well, because she's wise. She cares because she's wise. If you don't care about other people, well, you're not wise. Why? Because wisdom cares. Definitionally, because this is wisdom. So if that's a sticking point for you, sharing with other people, giving other people what you have, overflowing abundantly into other people's lives, well, you're not wise. Because if that's a problem, your problem is with the whole nature of what wisdom is. And that question ought to just resonate with us. How long? How long? Because you only have limited time. Your life is short and fleeting, and the path, well, you'll start running down it real quick and you'll eat up that time and it'll pass you by. But it doesn't have to. Because she's giving you options to get off the path. If you can get over those incentives to stay, if you can give up on those counterfeit options, there's no excuse not to. It's just our choice. And just as a last reminder, wisdom is dealing properly and wisely with everyone she encounters. So this, her crying out, her drawing attention, her telling people to get off the path, her calling people simple and scoffers and foolish, right? And we didn't actually even get into, well, why do they delight in their scoffing and why do fools hate knowledge? And that's okay. Because I think that question is so much more powerful than the specifics, right, of who she's talking to. Because it's how long? You have your choice, you have your option, you have your life, you're on your path, but how long are you going to stay on it? Because if you stay on it too long, right, you may never get to walk down the path of wisdom. Or when you do, you may only get to get this far when you could have gone miles and miles and miles and miles, and your life could have been completely different. So how long are you going to stay on that path? And right, this isn't just about salvation, but about every aspect of our lives, right? There's places in each one of our lives where we are walking in wisdom and places where we're not. And the question is, how long are you willing to stay on those unwise paths? How long? I'll certainly be meditating on that in my own life as we wrap this up, but I hope you will be too. And if you're not sure how to answer it, ask for wisdom. Go seek her out. And she will pour out her Spirit, she will make her words known to you. That's a promise. All right. See you in the next video as we begin to go through the second half of this call.